Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 63 of the Dynasty Junkies podcast, a proud member of the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network. I'm your host, Rocky Petrella at Dynasty FF Addict, and football is back. We're actually recording this. Hopefully, some people are watching it live on Thursday night. The Bucks are up 14-13 as we start. All is right with the world. Rojo is playing like crap, fumbling the ball. It's a beautiful. Cowboys are losing thanks to a Zerline mixed extra point. It's a beautiful thing to see. And I'm here tonight. We're doing the show all host show tonight. I got Andrew Hall FF here. Andrew, how you doing?
I'm great, Rocky. It's anytime there's football on, it's a good day.
Yes, football is back. It's great to be with you guys. I'm also Scott Sidlow. I'm happy to be potting with both of you tonight. It feels like I haven't done this in forever. I think I've done one half a show in the last month. Thanks to my wife's car breaking down, I had to leave mid-show. But Scott, how happy are you to have football back, and how you doing tonight?
Oh man, football has been there for the last 27 years. Since I was 9 years old, I have religiously watched football, and no matter what happens in life, it has been there. The ups and downs, the good and the bad, football's there every single year. Plenty of teams to hate, plenty of players to root for. It's a beautiful thing.
I agree. I'm just so happy to have it back. Looks like something else is going on in the game, but as I see Scott watching. But the first thing I guess we should touch on, because it is a big piece of news that happened today, is the Gus Edwards torn ACL. The Ravens are apparently cursed. All three of their main running backs going down now. So obviously Gus Edwards' value is dead. Does anybody, are you, either of you, interested in buying Tyson Williams at this point? A lot of people got him off waivers for free. Obviously a great selling point right now. What do you think, Andrew?
I mean, Tyson Williams was the fourth stringer for a while for a reason. So I'm not quite sure he's talented, but he's got the opportunity. And we've talked about this before. With running backs, opportunity can sometimes trump talent, and he's definitely going to get the lion's share of the carries. Obviously, the team went out and signed Bell and Trenton Cannon and their Devonta Freeman. Like, they're trying to piece together some sort of running back room there now. And obviously, Justice Hill got hurt too and got waived. So like they are just snake bit right now. But I mean, back to Tyson Williams, he's not somebody that I'm targeting. I guess if I have him, if I got him for free or something, great. I mean, if I'm a contender, I might hold on and just sort of see how the ride goes. But if I'm not contending, I'm trading him for a second. You know, you might get somebody out there that's willing to go and just say, hey, I need the guy. You know, maybe they had Dobbins, maybe they had Edwards. I mean, it's definitely a sell option in my book, because and also it could be a 2 or 3 week rental, right? This could be a thing where he's not even, maybe he gets hurt next. I hate to say it, but like, geez, this whole team is so bad. I don't know. So yeah, I don't think I'm leaning on him, but I wouldn't mind selling him.
And Scott, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, Le'Veon Bell and Devonta Freeman now might be viable
no interest,
fantasy
0.
options at this point.
None.
Yeah, I agree.
Don't care. No, seriously, I don't care. I don't care. I don't want any of them. I don't want anything to do with them. I don't want them clogging my rosters. I don't care about getting a third round pick for them. I'm already sick of the offers of like, oh, it looks like you need a running back. You know, here I just picked this guy up off waivers. You know, yeah, there's a reason he was there. I could have picked him up too. So
yep,
I'm good. Bell's toast, and he's got a bad. If he had a bad attitude on the Chiefs last year, went to the Super Bowl, what do you think he's going to be like there when Lamar is taking his rushing touchdowns? Like, come on, man. No, I have no interest in any of them. I don't care. I understand you're supposed to churn the waiver wire and get what you can and all that. That's great. Go ahead. It's not going to be for me. I'm not giving up anything, and I have no interest in even wasting my time picking up those guys.
And I've heard the narrative out there that this boosts Lamar. Does Lamar rush for like 1,500 yards at this point?
I mean, it's possible. Someone else I just saw on Twitter is like Marquise Brown. Here we go, right? Maybe they run him out of the backfield more because he's the only guy left. I mean, honestly, like it's possible. Like, we're at that point where I have no idea what to expect. And I think Scott hit the nail on the head. Like, I'm not buying any of these guys. I'm not sending a pick for any of these players. There's no point in doing that. Contending or not, even if I'm let's say I'm one running back short or something. I'm not going after these guys. I'd rather send a second for Darrell Henderson. You know what I mean? Like somebody who I think could actually get the ball and is someone who is kind of getting underrated, or like Chris Carson is out there. We'll talk about him more, but like there's a whole bunch of players that I think you can get for cheap-ish that are much more solid producers. So I'm not entirely out. If I get them for free, great, but I'm not paying anything.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys. I'm not interested in anybody in that backfield now. The only thing is if you already have them, this is the opportunity to try and sell for anything.
Yes,
like
correct.
You said, with Bell, if you can get a fourth for Bell and Freeman, that's doing good. So
you're making money.
And I think that exactly. And I think that Lamar is probably the biggest beneficiary. I think they may pass more with the lack of running game they'll probably have, which we didn't.
But they don't have anyone to throw to either.
That's the problem. Yeah, it's basically Hollywood right now, and
Mark Andrews,
Watkins actually healthy. I think maybe. That's about it. And yeah, Bateman's down. But yeah, I think he'll benefit. I don't think he'll run that much more. I mean, I don't think they're going to run tons of design runs just because they have their main running backs hurt. So he'll run just as much as he always has. But I don't think we're going to see, like, I've seen people saying he's going to run for, like, lead the league in rushing or something now. Like, I don't think that's happening just because they don't have their higher end running backs.
Well, betting on outliers is a bad process, right? Like, you don't bet on the outlier. If it happens, so be it. But my goodness, you're not going to go out there and say, I'm selling the farm for Lamar because he's going to run a lot more. That's not how it works.
Yeah, no. Okay, so I guess that's about all on Gus. I mean, it's not like we were all. It's not like when Dobbins got hurt. There's a lot of people that were banking on Gus to help their team immensely this year. So, one thing I did want to touch on is because I missed, like I said, I've missed most of the last month, including last week when you guys were talking about wide receivers. Something you guys mentioned in passing. I don't think it was a big topic of conversation, but it's definitely a narrative that's been out there it's basically just accepted at this point that wide receivers hold value longer than running backs. And I just wanted to contend that that's not necessarily the case, actually. I was thinking, and I wish I could have dove more into it because I just thought about this yesterday. But if you think about it, like we all agree, we don't really care about like if wide receiver threes and low end RB2s and RB3s are holding value, correct? Yeah. So If you're talking about the good to very good to great guys, a lot of the RBs are holding value 4, 5, 6+ years. I mean, we're talking. Dalvin Cook is going into his 5th year. Christian McCaffrey is going in his 5th year. Saquon Barkley is going in his 4th year. Those two of those just missed the whole last year and are holding value. Alvin Kamara is going into his 5th year, holding value. Zeke is going into his 6th year, holding value. And the other thing is we can usually identify these guys. Like we know Jonathan Taylor is going to be good. We know DeAndre Swift is likely going to be good. We knew Zeke was going to be good. That's basically my contention, is that the running backs, we can more easily identify which ones are going to be good. We see a lot of wide receivers that we expect to be good bust early. I think we get a lot more Laquan Treadwells and Corey Davises, who's rebounded some, N'Keal Harry's, things like that on the receiver end in rookie drafts. And I'm talking about comparing apples to apples, obviously. I mean, you don't want to, Cook isn't going to hold value longer than, say, A.J. Brown or Justin Jefferson. But when you're talking about young guys versus young guys, or even older guys versus older guys, I think it's pretty similar, more so than people make it out to be. And one thing I want to do, this is what made me think about it, because I looked at this earlier today. Do I have it up now? I want to try and share this. I was looking at ADP from just 2 years ago. I know some people might be thinking of 2 years ago, obviously the running back, that's going to help running backs. They haven't had much of a chance to lose value. But my point that I was looking at when I looked at this actually was, let me see if I can share it. I need to remove the thing here. Is the ADP, if you go back 2 years ago, for wide receivers, on DLF ADP. And I'm going to share my screen, but I'm having trouble here. So do we have it up here? Hopefully people can see this. So, yeah, DeAndre Hopkins and Devontae Adams are at the top. They look great. Then Juju, value has cratered. Odell, value has cratered. Michael Thomas, value has cratered. Julio Jones, value has cratered. Mike Evans, has fallen, not cratered. Tyreek, good. Keenan, okay. Stephon Diggs, okay. Antonio Brown, value crater. Thielen, Cooks, Hilton, Galladay, Lockett. I mean, and a lot of these are older guys, but and unfortunately, I can't sort this by age and ADP. But even you go by age from 2 years ago, and the age on here is actually their current age. But guys like N'Keal Harry, who was valued higher back then, would have been a young receiver that you would have wanted. DK and AJ Brown. Marquise Brown was maybe another one you might have wanted. JJ Arcega-Whiteside was drafted in the late first, early second. So even young receivers were, a lot of them, and they tend to lose value even quicker than the running backs are. So I've gone through my whole diatribe here. So I want to get your thoughts on it, because it just occurred to me as I was thinking about it today. So what are your thoughts? I think it's a little bit of a fallacy. Yes, there's certain running backs like the Mike Davises aren't going to hold value, but neither are the Sterling Shepherds of the world. So what do you think about my little speech here?
Well, I'll jump in. I don't think you're wrong. I'm not going to say that. I just think that you're cherry picking some terrific options, and that's the way to do it. If I'm going to argue against it, I would argue Barkley has not held his value, right? I would argue that there are some of those top running backs that have not held their value. They've actually gone down, right? Derrick Henry has not held value, right? Like
Derrick Henry increased in value for years until this year, though.
Well, that happened.
But
that happens with every player. I mean, that happened with Tyreek Hill on that list, right? Oh, Tyreek Hill's okay. He's number 2 or whatever now. Like it happens with every player in the top. I just think that the logic goes, and this is maybe why it's a generalization that may not be true, is that the turnover at running back is significantly higher than turnover at receiver. And I'm not talking about the top 12, top 15 guys at each position. Those guys tend to hold value no matter what. I mean, again, you hit the nail on the head, though. Odell Beckham cratered, right? Juju cratered. Antonio Brown cratered. Well, where is the running back list from 2019? Where are they? Because Gurley was on that list. David Johnson was on that list.
And you know what I mean? Like Gurley's the exception. Most guys don't fall off a cliff. They decline slowly.
Oh, but you could argue that Juju declines slowly. I mean, it just depends on how you look at it. I'm saying in general, overall, yes, you're going to have running backs that hold value better than some receivers, but the opposite is also true. And I think we would all agree that receivers have a longer lifespan in the NFL. That's kind of generally where that comes from.
Yeah. And I meant to mention that I agree with that totally. That they definitely hold value in the sense that they're going to play longer. But
right.
In terms of, but I don't care that Chris Godwin, if I'm drafting a young running back and a young wide receiver or trading for a young running back, I don't care what his value is going to be in 2027.
Oh, of course. No, and that's not what I'm arguing. I'm just saying, like, in general, it just feels like, and again, it feels like it's not a term that we should use, right? It's almost like ADP in general. Like, it's the general consensus thought is that running backs don't hold value as much. And like I said, we talked about this with Zach. And this is some things that where you can pick some various options on running backs that held value. But again, I would argue most of them didn't really hold value. Even DeAndre Swift hasn't held value, to be honest with you. And we'll get into that and some of these other things later. But some of the receivers like Diggs and Hill and Adams, I mean, Hopkins, some of those guys have held it just fine. And I would even argue that Sterling Shepard has probably held value too. His value wasn't high. It's still not high. I mean, it's
right.
Still
That's
something.
what I'm saying. So who cares if he holds?
Right, but like Ronald Jones, I mean, it goes up and down quicker, I think, for running back, more like running back 2s and running back 1s. That's kind of where I was coming, is like that running back 2 level, when you're in that 12 to 24 kind of range, those are the guys that aren't guaranteed a second contract. You know what I mean? Like, those are the guys that aren't, like Josh Jacobs or Miles Sanders, right? Those are guys that are most likely not going to hold their value. They're going to be the next Todd Gurley. They're going to be the next David Johnson that kind of gets tossed around the league. Or even Joe Mixon hasn't really held value that much, although I think he's worth it. There is definitely some outliers or some examples or exceptions that prove the rule. But I still think it's generally considered true that wide receivers hold value, quote unquote, better, but maybe not better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like I said, I agree in terms of absolute value, because they do. I'm not going to argue that wide receivers don't have longer careers, but the value is.
It depends on yeah.
And again, if wide receiver 2s are holding value, wide receiver 2s, especially low end wide, like the higher end wide receiver 2s that can sneak into the ones. That's the kind of guy I'm talking about, along with the running backs. Those top, that's what I'm trying to refer to as the top 15. I think we just think of it in general, like anybody, like if you don't want to get out on elite running backs because they're going to lose their value. Yeah, I mean.
It doesn't apply to elite, and that's kind of where I think you're trying to hit on, is that it does. I don't think it applies to elite running backs, because those are so hard to find. That's not who I'm talking about, though. Like, elite running backs hold value, just like elite receivers generally hold value. And you can even, maybe your argument is more nuanced in this, where elite running backs hold value better than elite wide receivers. But I'm still looking at,
yes, I agree.
Which I think is what your argument
was
is,
saying,
right?
yeah.
But I think from wide receiver 1 to 40 and running back 1 to 40, I'll take the receiver group to hold value.
And I agree with that, but I don't care about wide receivers 16 to 40. That's the thing.
I get you.
Just yeah, like wide receiver 16 40 are like all the same guy. So
sure.
And like I said, I think we do a better job of predicting the running backs earlier than we do of the wide receiver. And the funny thing is too, I was talking about this with someone today, is the wide receivers that do hold value, we start to devalue when they're at their peak. So as they hit 27, 28, 29, then we start devaluing them. So because after we're so happy that wide receivers hold their value.
Right. And once they've held it, you're like, I'm out. Wait a minute.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, that was my little diatribe. Scott, you have any thoughts since me and Andrew went back and forth there?
I just like to look at like the production side of it, right? Because I think usually the top running backs are going to have more production because of all the touches they get, both rushing and receiving. But what I'd be curious about is to take, and you're saying like the elite guys or, top 12 or whatever at their position, I'd be curious to see the production over a span of 3, 2, 3, 5 years, and then see, because running backs miss so much more time. So, yeah. I mean, I understand we're talking value, but I mean, they're not valuable if they're on your IR all season. So
well, that's a perfect way to segue, like value versus trade value versus production value, which we've gone into before, right? Like production value sometimes gets ignored, and I think that's a good way to put it, Scott.
Yeah, and I wish I had the time or the energy to do something like that, but right. I do not. So I just like
somebody somewhere has. We'll find it.
But yes, I would just say that a lot of these guys. I expect Jonathan Taylor will. I expect Swift to go up in value, Andrew, since you mentioned him, and continue to rise. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because I wasn't here last week to talk about it. So we'll get into our main topic of the night now, though, which was going into the season. We wanted to talk, I guess, basically sort of a buys and sells type thing. Guys were. The three of us are particularly high on in Dynasty as we head into 2021. Guys, we expect a value bump. Guys were higher on than the consensus, and also guys were lower on than the consensus. So I'll let Andrew start with one of his guys. Andrew, who do you got?
Well, I mean, there's obviously a lot of players that I value differently than everyone else, and I'm still trying to, I guess, kind of wrap my head around an article for Fantasy Pros I've been trying to write for like 2 weeks about trade calculators and how valuation is all different. It kind of ties in perfectly with what we were just talking about. But I think that if I had to pick one player that I think is criminally undervalued right now, it's Robert Woods. I don't know why he went down in value when they got an upgraded quarterback. Like that confuses me a little bit. Like, are we now worried that Stafford can't support 2 receivers?
I can tell you why in 2 words: 2 and 9.
Well, true, exactly. It's the age cliff, right? And that's exactly what we were just talking about. Yeah. But I still think Robert Woods at 31 in ranked Dynasty rankings on DLF rankings is 31st for wide receiver. What? Like, are you serious right now? Like, he's going to perform perfectly fine for the next few years. I'm not worried about Robert Woods in terms of scoring, in terms of longevity. Like at 29 is the new 26 for a receiver. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that it's that scary. And you actually said it perfectly before. He's been producing. He's been holding the value, and now we're devaluing him because of that. I don't get that logic. Like, no, it's Robert Woods is my guy among many.
$65 million extension as well.
Yeah,
so
he's not going anywhere.
LA doesn't have a cap apparently. So
yeah. Well, and they don't like draft picks, right? So they trade away all their picks and they keep the guys that they like. They like Robert Woods. I like Robert Woods. I don't see why he's going. Why would he be a wide receiver 3? That blows my mind. He is consistently a wide receiver 10 to 12 kind of guy. You know what I mean? Like that back end wide receiver 1, almost always on the field, terrific performer every single week. And I never have a doubt putting him in my lineup. I never go, man, do I start Robert Woods this week? The answer is yes, I'm starting Robert Woods. Who am I booting out? Oh, Jalen Reagor, see the bench. You know what I mean? Like, not a problem. So yeah, for me, it's Robert Woods by a landslide.
I love that choice too. And just to give an example of what you're saying, someone earlier this week, I think it was, someone sold him to me for Tev Coleman, Jamison Crowder, and a 2022 second. Now, I know that's a little crazy, but just to give you an idea of how undervalued he is, most people will not sell him for that. I get that, but it's still. I mean, I'm sure that was part of it that he's 29. He's going to be 30. But I expect maybe his best season ever this year with Stafford. I think that passing offense is going to go nuts this year, especially with the Akers injury. The Stafford teaming with McVay. I love that whole thing. Stafford, Woods, and Cup. I want all of them. So, Scott, any thoughts on Woods, and then you can go into yours.
Yeah, I'm in on Woods too, in a contender where I've won 3 straight championships. I actually traded Deontay Johnson for Robert Woods. There were a couple picks involved there to move up. That was in draft. But I mean, you talk about trading a young guy, for an old guy. And I mean, I was thrilled to do it. Like, actually, it was with our buddy, cousin Vito. So we made that deal because honestly, I like Deontay, but I have a young core and I'm just like, I want to win 4 in a row. I mean, I'll get a chance to win 4 in a row. So yeah, give me Robert Woods. All right, so on my end, I mean, I really have mostly I'm focusing on wide receivers because that's kind of the main position I build my teams around. That's the position I know the best, as we talked about last week. And a guy playing right now tonight, CeeDee Lamb. I don't care if he was number 2, he'd be too low. I think that by this time next year, he's easily top 3 and possibly 1, 2 there with, Justin Jefferson, maybe Calvin Ridley still young enough, whatever. But I think you're going to see Tyreek drop a little bit, Devontae, because again, those guys are starting to get older. So for me, CeeDee Lamb, you're not going to get him for any less than you can now, even if it costs a lot. It's going to be more in a year, in 3 months, and 6 months, in a year, and 2 years. And plus, they didn't re-sign Gallup, so I just think there's even more opportunity in the future. I don't know, man. I think the sky's the limit with the offense, with Dak, with his skill to play inside, outside. He's my guy. I don't care what it costs. I'm getting him. He's going to be a stud for the next several years.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with that. I love CeeDee Lamb as well. I actually did trade him to Russ in a TA league a couple of weeks ago, but that was like a 10-player deal. So there was a lot going on there. And I did get Calvin Ridley and a guy I'm going to talk about here in that deal as well. So I'll just get right into my guy because it's the guy I obviously have to bring up because I've been talking about him all off season pretty much on both here and Trade Addicts, which is TJ Hawkinson. He is kind of like CeeDee Lamb. He is tight end 5, so he's not low. But I am way higher, I think, still even above tight end 5. I've been saying for months that I think he's going to jump into that elite tier. And one thing I was looking at today, it's not apples to apples, but couple comparisons, like Darren Waller. People, I heard, the Hawkinson argument against him is that he's on a crappy offense. Well, Darren Waller has Derek Carr. Is he that much better than Jared Goff? He doesn't have any weapons around him either. Everybody's focused on Waller, and he's still doing it. TJ is also an athletic guy, just like Waller is, just like Kelsey is. And I was looking at Kelsey. Another thing people fail to realize, too, I think, is that, like, the guy, just because, like, I've heard also that, well, he didn't have anybody except Marvin Jones there last year. Why is he going to do it this year? I mean, especially at tight end, guys can get better in their third year. I looked at Kelsey. It's not apples to apples, like I said, but Kelsey, who didn't play year 1, but after his second full season, he had 103 targets, 72, 875, and 5. Hawk had 101 targets, 67, 723, and 6 last year in his second full season. And in the third year for Kelsey is when he started his tight end 1 run. And that was with, by the way, he went 85, 11, 25, and 4 in 4 touchdowns in 2016. And that was with Alex Smith, who that year had 3,500 yards and 15 TDs, and Kelsey still was tight end 1, and he did not have a lot around him either. He had Spencer Ware, he had late career Jeremy Maclin. I think Chris Conley was the wide receiver 2 on that team. So the bad offense argument does not work for me, especially because Detroit doesn't have a good defense either. So they're going to need to pass a lot. So, and I don't think he needs to jump even into the 140 target range. That third year for Kelsey, he had 117 and put up those numbers. So with Alex Smith, so I just love him. I think he's not just that he's going to be as good as last year. He's going to be much better, and he's going to be in that elite tier. He's going to be mentioned. We're going to think of him the way we think of Waller and Kittle next year. That's what I think. Any thoughts from either of you two?
I 100% agree. I was just sitting here nodding the whole time. I'm like, nailed it. Yep, exactly. I think Hawk is one of those players that everybody drafted him thinking he was going to be the next Kelsey, and then they kind of got anxious or worried or nervous or something and kind of got off of him.
Especially that first year when he got hurt.
Exactly. And so now they're all like, man, I was so close. I was wrong, but let's move on and look at the next tight ends. Oh my God. And now we got Kyle Pitts, of course. Hawk is getting moved down draft board significantly, and I love it. It's like, give me the discount, because I'm with you. I think if you don't count last year as breaking out, which I think you can, this year he's going to dominate, because there's just no one else to go to. He's got the talent. He's got the opportunity. I mean, Goff is still a quarterback, right? People don't think he can throw or something, but he's still worth the quarterback position, and will have to distribute the ball, and that's going to go to Hawkinson. So I'm right there with you.
Okay, Scott, any thoughts on Hawk before we move into the next guy?
I think Andrew made a great point. Like, people are so impatient, and I believe that I now traded for more shares of Hawk than I drafted. Because it was just
me
like,
too.
Same.
Oh, you want to next year's first? Great. Yeah. So I'm happy to buy, and I think that's a perfect example, and I think we're all on the same page there.
I will jump in with this though. His price is going up,
yeah.
Right? Like, his price is coming back to where I think it should be, which is unfortunate if you're trying to buy him at a discount, but I don't mind paying full price either.
No,
like,
that's what I'm saying.
Trades where
Full
I paid
price
almost
now
Yeah.
will be cheaper in not cheap, but not full price in 2022.
I agree entirely. I'm saying he used to have a discount, like a 20% off, Target red tag kind of pricing, and red light special or something like that at Kmart or whatever. But like, now he's going at what I would consider his accurate value now, and that's still cheap, and I'm still willing to pay that. I agree 100%.
Yeah, I love you guys agreeing with me. So because I can't wait to see it. It's going to happen. So Andrew, who's your next guy?
So I'll pivot to the running back position for this one, because I have a feeling that Scott's going to talk more about receivers again, which is perfectly fine. And I think quarterbacks are tricky because the values in 1QB versus Superflex are so different. And I just feel like quarterbacks are kind of, I don't know, it's very league dependent in my book. So my second guy that I am definitely higher on than consensus, and I mentioned him earlier, was Chris Carson. I just think for some reason Chris Carson has this label that, like, he's a 1-year rental, or he's not going to be with that team very long. And the team didn't do anything other than add Alex Collins, which I'm not afraid of. Rashad Penny is most likely out the door. Like the Travis Homer, DJ Dallas, like, none of these guys worry me. So, and I don't like banking on an injury. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing with Carson. They're like, well, can he stay healthy? It's like, until he's not, I mean, why wouldn't I take him as a running back 2 at least? So yeah, I mean, I just think that it's to me anyway, Chris Carson is currently being ranked as running back 25. He's outside RB2 territory, and that flabbergasts me. Like, I cannot find that reasoning. I give me all the Chris Carson at that price.
Yeah, and he's been perennially undervalued, if I can talk correctly. But yeah, and a lot of it's that initial draft capital. I think it just sticks with you forever. Like a guy, we're not going to do everybody we put down on our sheet here, so I'm just going to mention him real quick. A guy I don't think we're going to get to talk about, but a guy I think is going to have more value next year, and I know people are going to think I'm crazy, is James Robinson. I've been accused of being a James Robinson truther, where really I was more of an ETN doubter all off season, and then he got hurt. I think it's a very interesting parallel between the two. They both had the first round running back drafted, and I think it's going to be the same thing. I think Robinson's going to produce again this year, and I think he's going to still be undervalued next year because ETN's coming back. But Carson's fought off anybody they brought in, and he's produced RB1 or high-end RB2 numbers year after year. And I think that's what we're going to see with Robinson. Like, if he puts up another like 12 to 1,500 yard season, I just don't get the mental gymnastics it takes to think, okay, well, because they drafted ETN in the first round a year ago, they're just going to ignore him from now on after 2 straight seasons. And again, he still has to do it. But so I think it's very similar between the two. Carson just forced his way onto the field, and I think that's what we're going to see with J-Rob.
Well, I'll just real quick piggyback on that. I think Robinson is one of those guys that could have actually had a terrific year with ETN in the lineup. And so this is one of those where it gets people out of that, where like ETN's hurt. Well, ETN, in all honesty, too, we don't know what he was going to be, right? And so if J-Rob goes off again, how does that team not invest in J-Rob and kind of make him their guy? So like I'm right there with you. I agree. I think if you can get Robinson, maybe a lot harder now because of the ETN injury, but if you can get Robinson in a dynasty league and
I still don't think it costs a lot. I think you could get him for like a first.
That's what I'm saying, on the cheap, because it depends, right? Like how cheap are you willing to pay?
It would have been cheaper a month ago. But.
For sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I'm just saying there are definitely some teams out there that still don't believe in him. And I'm like, well, I'll take him. I don't mind.
Yeah, and I need to get more of him. I wish I had gotten more shares during the offseason because I'm like you. I believed he was going to produce with ETN there and was going to force a much bigger split than people were thinking. Where in the preseason, for as much as that means, I'm not a big believer in the preseason, but he was running with the ones almost in pretty much every game in practices. I just think people were overrating ETN, But Scott, if you have anything you want to say there, and then we'll move on to your guy.
Yeah, so I think everybody knows what James Robinson did last year. He was 6th in points per game, so that doesn't surprise anybody. But going back to Chris Carson, this is rhetorical, but if I asked you where you thought he finished in points per game, you would not say he was top 12. I mean, I don't think anybody would think that, honestly. I don't even know if Seattle fans would. But I feel like Seattle's so forgotten. Like, man. So he did miss 4 full games and most of a 5th game. So obviously he wasn't up there with the leaders in points. But points per game, he was 12th. He was ahead of Jonathan Taylor, Zeke, Antonio Gibson, Swift, all those guys. So that's pretty. I mean, he just continues to do it year after year. He's very underrated.
Well, just real quick, I think this list, we can almost look at this. These are guys that production value is greater than trade value, right? Like that's kind of exactly what we're discussing. Right? Production value. Yes. And I didn't mean to steal your thunder, Scott, but as I can read your mind, I'm like, that's exactly where we're heading here. These are people that are trade value is low, but production value is high. So yeah, keep going, Scott. You're speaking my language.
That's it. Yeah, we're same wavelength here, man. That's exactly it. I will throw in one running back of my own real quick, a guy that I didn't know I was so high on until now. But more of like, I found that in a couple, I'm down to like 3 redraft leagues. I'm so proud of myself because I used to be in like 15, but now that I'm so into Dynasty, I'm like out of redraft. But regardless, I think did you do that while you had 40 plus Dynasty leagues? Okay. I've been dropping down redraft and increasing Dynasty. Okay. So and of those 3, 2 of them are keepers. But anyway, I do have Javonte Williams in just about every format, whether it's Dynasty, best ball, keeper, redraft, whatever. I noticed that across all of my leagues, I have him like everywhere. So I think that just tells, sometimes you don't really know it until you look at, you look back and you look at your rosters and you're like, my rostership on this guy is insane. Like, I liked him, but now I realize that for the value, I really like him. Right. So it may not be that I certainly didn't like him more than Najee for the rookie class, but I'm just going, he's right now at running back 18 ADP. So yeah, I mean, I think Melvin Gordon is not along for this season, let alone the league. So Javonte is going to be taken over sooner than later. And I love Pat Shurmur as an OC, and he gets the most out of his running backs. So I'm really excited about Javonte's upside.
And that I love that choice too. I mean, to me, he was kind of getting into what I was saying before. He was so clearly, to me, above ETN in this class. I never got quite what people were seeing with ETN. I mean, I don't think he was going to be a bad player if he played this year, but Javonte, I think, has RB1 potential. I don't think ETN does, barring like a 75 reception season, which I didn't see happening. So, I love him. And if they can just get a quarterback, my God, his ceiling is so high because I mean all that talent around him, you can't focus on Williams either. And like you said, it's going to be the classic thing we see every year with rookie running backs. There's always a Melvin Gordon or somebody else, a Carlos Hyde for Nick Chubb and things like that. Eventually, by the end of the season, it's the rookie, and he's going to be well above RB18 by the time the end of the year comes. Unless were you going to say something, Andrew?
I was just going to jump in with, I think 18 is about where I have him, so I don't think I'd go crazy in saying he's under or overvalued. I think that's probably pretty good just because Gordon is still there, right? Like, not to say that for Dynasty that doesn't matter as much, but it is going to matter some. And so I feel like 18 is a pretty good spot in my rankings for him, but I definitely don't hate Scott for thinking he's better than that.
But is Gordon going to be there this time next year?
We don't. I don't know. We could be, honestly. Like, again, everybody's saying no, but we don't know that, right? Gordon could get a chip in his shoulder and blow up. We don't know. I mean, I'm just saying.
He's had like one good season. He's not good.
What I'll say to that, though, is kind of like the Hawk thing, even though Hawk's a lot higher in regards to his position, is that if you're paying RB18 prices, that's going to be cheap a year from now, is what I think. So
very true. Yep.
Yeah. So I like that a lot. I'll go into my last guy, and I'll move on to some guys we're lower than. I'm going to mention this guy since Andrew also had him on his list, which is Tua Tagovailoa. I think I said that right. He did not have a bad year last year, as much as people think he did. He wasn't amazing, but he wasn't awful. I think he had. I wish I had it pulled up now. I looked at it earlier. I think it's 14 touchdowns to total touchdowns to 5 interceptions. That includes a couple rushing touchdowns. He's not a mobile guy, but he did score a few rushing touchdowns last year, and they've upgraded his weapons at receiver, and people are doubting this guy far too quick. I think it's the Justin Herbert effect is what it is. I mean, most quarterbacks don't come out the way Justin Herbert did last year, rookie quarterbacks. And Tua was coming off a COVID year, which granted Justin Herbert was too, but also a year where he had a devastating injury the year before, didn't have a preseason, probably wasn't even fully healthy when the season started, and then was yo-yoed by his team because of Ryan Fitzpatrick, and they were contending. And I just think we're going to see a big jump from Tua in year 2. His ADP on DLF right now is QB 14. I think he's a QB 1 this time next year. What do you think? What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I wasn't as huge of a Tua guy, but I mean, it's mostly just because he's a lefty. I mean, you just don't see it. And I mean, statistically, I'm just saying, you just don't see left. Okay, Steve Young. Wow, you got
that was the first name that popped into my head.
I knew it did, Rocky. I knew I could read your mind. But honestly, name another lefty that was super.
I thought Mike Vick was a lefty.
He was, but he wasn't a great passer.
Passer. You know what I mean? Like,
great fantasy.
Algie Crumpler was like 300 pounds. He had a huge target to hit out there. You know, I mean, but. Yeah, I like his weapons. The new offense is what I'm curious about. I mean, he was playing in Chan Gailey's offense last year, which there's no fit there. It makes no sense, and that's why Chan Gailey's not there anymore. But I just don't know what to expect from the new offense, so it's kind of a wait and see for me. But at the same time, the youth, the weapons, it's definitely on an upward trajectory. So I don't necessarily disagree. I'm just certainly not all in on him.
Well, I'll just add this. We talked about Tua with Nick Whalen. I think that was after you, maybe during the time or after you had to leave there, Rocky. But I know we were both kind of surprised at the time. That was August ADP. He was QB 17. So the market has corrected itself and kind of risen Tua back to where I think he should be.
Okay.
We talked about it a lot during that QB episode where he and Burrow are both, in my book anyway, are both very similar. Except Burrow got to miss half of the season, so nobody got to see him underperform. So I think that insulated his value. And honestly, like, as much as you don't want to agree with something like that, like, those things matter in ADP world, right? It's not a ranking. It's not like who is better. It's like, this is where the market believes. The general public is very different and kind of wildly off in some cases because of perception, which is not reality. And I think there was this perception that Tua struggled last year. Well, of course he did. Like, you just listed all the things he had to go through to get there, and his top receiver was Devontae Parker. You know what I mean? Like, that's not ideal. You know what I mean? So like, let's give the kid some credit. He got through the season and got somehow less like credit.
And even after
deserved.
Devontae Parker, he was throwing to like Jakeem Grant and
Albert Wilson,
and Lynn Bowden, the slot wide receiver.
Players that aren't even in the NFL right now, right? That says a lot. And I think that, in all honesty, I think that people are very, and I say this with the most respect, people in fantasy are very short-sighted and when it comes to memory, and they'll remember the last thing that you did, whether it was something or nothing. And Tua near the end of last year wasn't doing much. So there were a lot of fantasy managers out there that had Tua that were just getting fed up, whether they needed him in Superflex in the playoffs or something. Like it wasn't a great end of a year. And I think Burrow didn't have a bad end of the year. He was right in your IR spot. So you have no negative feelings. They're the same thing, really. And Burrow, I mean, he was the guy from day one. Tua had to take over after Fitzpatrick. Like there's all these, they're the exact opposite season, right? But it's really the almost identical if you look at it with a strictly analytical lens on it and not have emotion. So yeah, I always found it odd that Tua was going so low. I'm actually kind of glad to see ADP rise a little and get, I don't know, closer to where he should be. Let's put it that way. But that also, again, it kind of bums me out because now the discount's gone. Dang.
I love that comment you made about how as the community at large is sort of short-sighted, because it's so funny that we want to take the long view and overvalue youth, and at the drop of a hat will change values because of because of 8 games in his rookie year. Like it's insane. We're gonna move on to the guys that were that selling, that were lower on, whatever you want to call it. But real quick, in terms of being totally overreactive. In the game tonight, I just noticed Antonio Brown has 4 catches for 118 yards and a touchdown. Are you trying to sell him after this game right away?
If I had him, I don't have him anywhere. Yeah, I don't have him anywhere because I don't trust. Well, I shouldn't say that. I probably have him on a couple of redraft teams, but if I have him in Dynasty, I'm definitely selling after this week. If this is the kind of week he's going to have, sure, he could do it again, but he could also goose egg you, and I'm out on that kind of thing. So yeah.
Brady does love him though. I do think I think we could see more. I mean, if you're a contender, I don't hate holding on to him. I wouldn't be buying him, but I don't mind holding him either. I just thought it was interesting that in a half he's put up like, what's that, 15, 20 plus fantasy points already. So I can't wait to see the Antonio Brown victory laps tomorrow. So, but we'll get into the guys that were lower on. So I think, Andrew, we are back to you. So what's one guy you want to put that you're lower on?
Well, I feel like I keep beating this drum, and even as a Bengals fan, it's odd, but like I'm not enjoying Jamar Chase as wide receiver 9. That just feels painfully high. Like, what are we doing, guys? I mean, that wide receiver 9 is pretty much his ceiling. And I'm not saying it's impossible. I mean, he could be wide receiver 3, right? We don't know. But I'm not buying him as a rookie at his ceiling. I don't like that. That's too risky for me. As much as we just said before that wide receivers hold their value, I have a hard time believing Jamar Chase holds this value. Like, whoa, buddy, that is so high. There are so many receivers that are like in that same range. Higgins is, I think, wide receiver 11. And these are rankings we're looking at, DLF rankings that I'm using for mine. But even just to rank him at 9, you're almost saying he can't fail. And I don't know if I like that. Rookie receivers tend to fail at least a little bit and struggle and all of this. So I just hard pass on Jamar Chase at wide receiver 9. I wrote an article earlier this offseason for Fantasy Pros about how drafting Jamar Chase could ruin your Dynasty team because he was going in the 2nd round. And that's exactly what this is. 2nd round of Dynasty ADP startup. Like, what are you doing? Like, that's the most risky kind of play you can take. And in startups, I don't mind being risky, but with a 2nd round pick, that's a lot of money you're just throwing away if he's wide receiver 26. You know what I mean? Like, what have you done to your team there? So yeah, I love Jamar Chase, the player. I'm a Bengals fan. I'm hoping he does well, but I cannot get my head around wide receiver 9 for him. That's just ungodly high to me.
Scott, thoughts on Chase?
He's also the player I put on my list. I mean, I just, I did not end up with many shares, and I mean, I think, again, that's really telling, right? Because it's not like I didn't like him, but when you actually get into the draft and you pull the trigger and it wasn't him, I think I have just 2. I think just 2.
It's 2 more than I thought, to be honest.
So To me, for me, that's basically 0 for anyone else. Like that's basically -2 for the average Dynasty player.
That's like
honestly.
0.5% of Scott's rosters. So.
So I mean, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, listen, there was a really weird quote that came out, and I don't know how big this was. Maybe everybody saw this, and I was like the last one to see it. But it was like him trying to explain about how he's trying to learn how to catch an NFL football because it doesn't have the stripes on it. I was like, this can't be real. This isn't real.
It's not
okay.
real. That was a misconstrued quote by PFT. Right? Pro Football Talk went out of their way to find a clickbaity way to word what he said, and he actually tweeted it out and was like, "Guys, that's not what I said." He just said that it's different catching balls without the lines on them, and he's learning how to do that. But every receiver has to do that. He never said he couldn't catch them or that it was hard to catch them. He said it's different. And so Pro Football Talk tweeted out, Jamar Chase blames the fact that the balls are different on the reason he can't catch. And he was like, bro, that's not what I said. Like, you can literally read the quote that he said, and that they tweeted out this whole, like, they made this narrative because that's what they do. So no, that had nothing to do with it. That was not involved in the drops. It is different. I agree. It is different. They're a different ball. But he's not blaming that for the reason. That's
So this is, and that's Andrew. Like, if you weren't on, I would have explained that, but I wanted you to take it and run because I knew you knew what was going on there.
I get heated. Like, this is my team here. You're just.
But no, here's the thing. When you're coming up with stories like that, I mean, it's gonna get to the point where the hate goes too far. Right, because it's just gonna spiral out of control with just these dumb things. He's gonna come out, he's not gonna play many snaps the first few weeks, maybe, or he doesn't really have any production. I mean, 6 weeks from now, we're probably buying him. So, I mean, honestly, that's kind of where I could see things going, and I think that was ultimately the bigger picture for me looking at drafting him in rookie drafts was just going. Listen, Higgins to me is a stud. I love T. Higgins. I think Boyd he's the Cooper Kupp of that offense. I think he's a really good receiver and really good in that role. I feel like their line is getting better because when you're the worst, you can only go up. So I know that they're putting that together. They started to gel a little bit second half of the season last year. But, Burrow coming off the injury, a lot of these factors, I felt like there would be an opportunity for Chase to go lower and then maybe be in buy opportunity. So right now he's definitely a sell. But I think that could be one of those things we could revisit midseason and go, you know what, you need to buy this guy because his time's coming.
I love that point because, I mean, we generally don't hate players. We hate ADPs. So
exactly.
And that's exactly what we're talking about here. To me, it's ridiculous when we put a guy who's never played a game as a wide receiver one. What are we doing here? Like, especially at that position. Like, I can get it at running back. Like, if you think Najee Harris is that good and you want to put him at RB10, I get that. Because like I said earlier, I think we predict – you can predict running backs a lot better in fantasy than you can predict wide receiver. We've had way too many guys that we thought Corey Davis was a can't miss prospect coming out.
Harris Campbell, Andy Isabella, N'Keal Harry.
N'Keal Harry
exactly right.
was top 3 in a lot of. Laquan Treadwell was like the consensus 102 in his draft. We miss so often on the what we think are the elite wide receiver prospects. So I love that, but I agree, and I love what you said too about T, because like I still think he could be a wide receiver 1 this year with Chase there, and people he could have been in our buy section. Our guys were higher on, so probably all higher on him in the consensus. I think
I considered.
Yeah. So did I.
Yep.
But Scott, who was one of your other guys?
So really, I mean, Chase was kind of the one that jumped out the most for me from the wide receiver position. I really would have loved to talk about Dobbins and just the reason is, and so if we go back to pre-injury everything and pretend that offense is all intact and what they do, they don't throw the ball to the running back. I mean, and typically rushing quarterbacks do it less. And so if they're not catching passes, most I got to think about how to say this, but JJ Zacharyson brought up in his breakout running back episode that the running backs that break out and or the running backs that are likely to finish as the top are pass catching running backs. They're going to be involved in the passing offense because a target is worth more than a rush.
Yep.
And so Dobbins in that offense, could he have had 15 touchdowns? Maybe he could have. But he's probably going to catch like 20 passes.
Yeah, he was going to have 15 touchdowns.
And that's the thing. Like we don't even know because Lamar Jackson might have been running them all in. I mean, it's just so you just don't know. So to me, I was definitely out on Dobbins wherever he was going. It was way too high. I only had 2 shares. I sold both of them like right before. One of them was like 2 months ago, but the other one was basically when the news of Wentz and Quentin Nelson broke out and the guy panicked on JT, and I flipped Dobbins essentially for JT.
Oh my God.
So I mean, I was like, he offered it to me. I mean, I was like, all right, yeah, I got you. But there's my
what
proof
were
of
you saying about
a
lot of the community being overreactive.
Yeah, well, take advantage, right?
Yeah, but yeah, it's hard to imagine Dobbins if he had stayed healthy.
His upside was unlikely to be. Would he have a high floor? Yes. But does he have a super high, like, elite ceiling? I personally don't believe so. I didn't believe so as a prospect. He was my number 5 back in that class. And going forward, I don't see, I guess the point I want to make being a Dynasty podcast is if you're a rebuilding team, I don't necessarily think you should be trading for him. I mean, if you can get him super cheap, like a couple of seconds or something like that, or if you can give up Henderson, right? Or one of those rental running backs that aren't going to have much value past this year, a contender who lost Dobbins, want something like that. By all means, go for it, but you should not be giving up your future firsts or other young players.
What about Chris Carson? Chris Carson or J.K. Dobbins?
If I'm rebuilding, I'll take Dobbins.
Same here.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I was going to go with this. Like, I think Carson's one of those guys that can get moved in a deal like that because he does have this short-term value mentality, right? Where people like still think his production value is pretty high, and obviously so do I. But I think his trade value is somewhat low, and Dobbins' trade value just took a hit, and the production value is very. So I think you could probably get a deal done like that straight up 1-for-1. And I know a lot of rebuilding teams that I don't necessarily want to get rid of Carson, but I do think Dobbins is better long term as a 3-year window kind of a deal. So if I'm rebuilding and out, hey, I'll take that. I don't know if the Dobbins manager would do it, right? But like if you had Carson, I would do it and send Carson for Dobbins, no doubt. Yeah.
And in one of the TA leagues, I'm one of those contenders that had Dobbins, and I sold him for Judy in the 3rd. I was thrilled with that.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty good. And the 3rd. So the 3rd was on the Judy side. I love that.
I got a 3rd. I offered it to him. He accepted it. And he's actually a rebuilding team too. So he thought the Dobbins value.
Okay. He probably felt like Judy's value peaked, just like Andrew does.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'll get into that. Get ahead.
Okay, so I will go into one of my guys, and I don't know if this was a rogue, because I know DLF ADP is done by a fairly small sample size of mock drafts, so I don't know if this is a rogue draft or no. But Zach Wilson is a QB 13 in August ADP. That is insanity to me. I do not get that, and it's crazy to me too because he had a good preseason, and people are like, people who agreed with what I think are saying they're wrong now. I'm saying, no, you're not wrong. The preseason means nothing. I mean, show me in the, and I could look like a total idiot 6 weeks from now if he's throwing for like 2,000 yards this game. But I just don't get it. Like I didn't see it in college. He was my QB 5 of the 5 guys in this class. I like Mac better even. So, and I know a lot of people weren't high on Mac. Who was also actually looked good in the preseason, by the way, but for whatever that means. But yeah, I don't think it means much. But yeah, I don't get it. I know he had like a 70% completion percentage, I think, in 2020. But I did not see a lot of accuracy when I watched him. He made some risky throws. He didn't always get picked off, but But when you looked, I mean, like I said, with his throws, it was even like a lot of guys were having to stop to catch the ball. They were having to reach behind him. That's what I saw when I was watching. Maybe I was watching the wrong games. I don't know, because some people like him way more than I do. And apparently the DLF mock drafters like him way more than I do. I would not draft him I wouldn't draft him in the top 20 quarterbacks. I just don't get it. I like Elijah Moore. Corey Davis is nice, but his weapons are not amazing. and I just don't see what other people are saying. And I wish this is something I probably need to do more, which is draft guys I don't like, because I wish I had some Zach Wilson so I could sell him for QB 13 prices. I would do that all day.
Well, I wanted to jump in with this. He's ranked as QB 16, which I think is ridiculous too. Like, that's still too high to me too. You know who I this is going to sound
because
odd.
He's young.
Right, but do you know who I think his fantasy or his dynasty value will probably be very similar to? Is Sam Darnold. Right, like Sam Darnold came in the league and everybody had high hopes and they were all kind of ranking him at his ceiling, and then he kind of struggled in the Jets offense. Does any of this sound familiar? Like, this is very possibly going to happen right now again, even though it's not Adam Gase, right? We're not talking about the same offense, but I don't know what this team is, and to put him at 13 or even ranking him at 16, I'm out. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like, I'd much rather have other guys like your classic Rocky Petrella moves where it's like, give me Kirk Cousins, give me Ben Roethlisberger. Like, I'll take those guys 10 rounds later and be much happier with myself. Yeah, I'm right there with you.
It's funny when you said who you think of, because I know Zach Wilson also has some mobility. It made me think of like maybe Daniel Jones, who no one's interested. And I could totally see him having a Daniel Jones career, because I do not think he's a particularly good passer. So
overhyped, underperformed.
And Daniel Jones has run a little bit in his NFL career, but I don't see him. But he's not a difference maker with his legs, and that's the way I see Zach Wilson. He'll run. He'll maybe have an 80-yard run and fall down at some point, but he's not gonna be Lamar Jackson or even Russell Wilson. I don't think so.
He doesn't have the talent or the tools. Like, he doesn't have the talent around him. I'm with you.
Okay. Unless you do, either of you have a guy you really want to get to, because I do want to get to find me a trade. Is there anybody else you want to mention before we move on?
The only one that I really wanted to hit on was kind of related to J.K. Dobbins, was Cam Akers. I just feel like Cam Akers is someone that I'm not sure I can really get behind, and he's being ranked right now as running back 21 in DLF.
Even
and I feel like that's a current, like very current, yeah. And I think that's probably pretty close. And so I wanted to bring him up because the injured running backs are a lot tougher to project into the future, right? Where it's like, I don't know if they're going to come back at full speed. I wouldn't call Akers or Dobbins elite like McCaffrey or Barkley, like we were talking about, that hold their value and all that. I don't think either one of them are true running back ones after this injury, or each of their injuries, which are both pretty big injuries, right? This isn't like, I twisted my ankle for a couple games. These guys are out of commission for 9 months. I mean, that's
Akers especially. We've literally never seen a guy come back from that injury and produce.
And I'm willing to say that Akers is the first to do it, to come back and be substantially, close to what his value was. But even RB21 is just so much risk to me. Like, man, even as a rebuilder, I'm not sure I want to take that on. And then again, like, Akers didn't do it the whole year anyway. Like, he hasn't been around long enough to really earn that kind of he'll be fine mentality. It worries me. And Achilles are obviously very different than ACLs. We've seen people come back from ACLs more now. Maybe this is the turn where Achilles happens and people start to recover and fine. But I don't want to be the first one. I don't want to be the one left holding the Todd Gurley bag there. You know what I mean? Like, I'm kind of out on Akers. I traded him away in a couple leagues. There's one, I think, where I still have him on my roster because I just didn't feel like the price was right and I'm rebuilding anyway. I'm like, I'll hold off and see what happens. Maybe something crazy goes down and someone likes him, or hell, maybe he comes back. It's a free league with some good friends. I'm like, I don't mind. At that point, I'm not risking anything. It's one league. Who cares? I kind of ride the lightning and see if it happens. If it doesn't, okay. But like, I don't know. I'm not. He's definitely not someone I'm targeting. Much like Dobbins for you, Scott. Like, I liked the talent. I didn't love it, and I think a lot of people out there are kind of getting that confused and saying, well, he's the guy. Well, he's not anymore. So I don't know. I'm kind of out on Akers, and the same reasons for Dobbins, really.
We don't bet on statistical improbabilities.
Yep.
So why are you doing it? I don't understand. I mean, everyone just keeps telling me, I'm honestly sick of having this argument. No one that young has done. Listen,
No one
He
that
was my
good has
number
ever.
one running back in that class. No one's more heartbroken than me. I love Cam Akers, but like, guys, it's never happened. So you're betting on history. That's really intelligent. That's a really intelligent way to go about it.
And eventually it probably will happen, but I'm not betting on it until it does happen.
Yeah, I'd rather be the guy who's wrong that has no acres on my rosters than be the guy that's right with 1 acre share somewhere where it's like, odds are so slim. Like I'm not too worried about it.
And it's funny you mention acres to me too, because when we came up with this idea for the show, the first thing that came to my mind is that it sucks obviously for Akers and ETN that they were hurt and they're losing a year of their young careers, but it also sucks for me that these were the 2 guys I absolutely would have put on this list that I've been down on all off season before they got hurt, and now we'll never know. But
it's like it makes you right, but you're not right.
Yeah, I know. I don't feel I'm right, but I'm
but
disappointed that I don't get the chance to be right. That's what it is.
Like James Robinson in a way, right? Like you got bailed out in a way. Like, no, I like Robinson anyway. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to our Find Me a Trade. So this week it was submitted by Joe Shuey at Shuey_FF on Twitter. And by the way, this guy is actually it's funny too, because he reached out to Andrew, not me, a couple weeks ago, but he's actually in my fantasy football survivor league, which keep an eye out for that. We'll be tweeting out about it. It's a pretty cool format. But it's a sleeper league. It's a 10-team PPR super flex with no tight end premium, 4-point passing touchdowns, -2 for picks. 29-man roster, start 10, QB, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, a super flex, and 2 flex. So his roster is in the starting lineup right now. He's got Pat Mahomes, Antonio Gibson, Javonte Williams. So really nice there, obviously. He's pretty solid all around on this team. He's got CeeDee Lamb, and he's young. Deontay Johnson, T. Higgins at wide receiver, Darren Waller at tight end, Judy and Callaway in his flex, and Tua as his second quarterback. He's also got Trey Lance and Carson Wentz on the bench, so he's kind of loaded at quarterback. He's got the recent hot waiver pickup, Tony Jones on his bench at running back. Not really much else there. Wayne Gallman is really the only other name I'm seeing that looks all that good, and he doesn't look that good. So his bench is a little weak. Jacoby Myers, he has a wide receiver. He does have Elijah Moore. He's got Russell Gage, Christian Kirk, tight end. He's got Adam Troutman and Jacob Harris. He does have ETN, who's now hurt, obviously, who we talked about. And then some other guys on his taxi like Brevin Jordan, Chris Evans, Hunter Long. So very strong starting lineup. Not the best bench other than at quarterback. So what he said was, my goal is to be competing but make a harder push to win next year, which I think he could compete if everything goes right. He needs basically everybody to stay healthy pretty much, as we said, with that bench. I have a lot of young core guys that should take steps this year and into next year. That's the main goal. But I'd like to keep this a younger team, as my other teams generally have more vets, and was trying for something new. I probably need some RB depth, he finished up with. So, Andrew, you want to get into yours first?
Sure, yeah. And I think I like this team, but in 10-team leagues, I tend to like every team, right? Where it's like I kind of have to get my brain around it. It is a 10-team league, so in
all
my
the
mind,
teams generally look good. Yeah.
Yeah. And in my mind, if I'm in I think I was in one 10-team league last year, and we actually went up to 12 with a dispersal, and it was a weird thing. But in any case, 10-team leagues for me, I need as many studs as I can get, right? Like I'm trying to consolidate every trade I get. I want to make sure that I want to be on the side where there's one good player and you get the best player in the deal, right? Now, generally speaking is different than specifically speaking. But with that in mind, and the fact that he lost ETN, I do think he needs a little bit of running back depth to kind of make a push, whether it's this year or next. I do think that's a thing. And I mean, looking at the draft picks, I don't know if you went into that at all, but he has the 4th and the 5th. That's it for next year. So it's not like he's going to be able to draft another running back next year. If ETN doesn't come back solid, or has other question marks, then you might be looking at a 2-year window before you kind of, I don't know, get back into the hunt. So my trade was to trade Jerry Jeudy, who we didn't get into, but I'm kind of under the impression that I'm lower than anyone else on. But trade Jerry Jeudy and Carson Wentz to Sizzle 56 for DeAndre Swift and Sterling Shepard as a throw-in. So my thought process here, of course, Sizzle, only has one QB on his roster. So he definitely needs some help there. I think Judy's getting a lot of buzz heading into the season. I think with Bridgewater taking over, I think it's very possible that Judy is, the guy or whatever, and the number one receiver in Denver. But this way you get back a kind of, I would almost say like a depressed asset a little bit with DeAndre Swift. And then Sterling Shepard just for like a bench role player kind of thing. And the other logic too is Sizzle has really, like I said, that one startable quarterback and is very running back heavy. He has a lot of running backs on his team, including DeAndre Swift, which I think is his third running back. Or running back 3 or flex or what have you. And then a lot of his receivers are on the older side. So Judy might be enticing for him to kind of make this make sense, I guess. Value wise, I think the DeAndre Swift side is more value. But if in this league with it being 10 teams, I could see somebody deciding, hey, you know what, let me split Swift up into 2 players and kind of get some better value out of it, I guess. Scott, what did you think about my trade? Was it something you would do? Is it way off? I mean, where are you at with this?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I think, I think Judy is ascending, but I also can see where his value has gone up so much compared to where it was last year, right? And so it is a good sell point just from that aspect, right? Like
on the hype,
we can't predict the market. We don't know. Like when Dogecoin is on its way up, we don't know what it's going to get to, right? But you're going to pick a spot to sell and take your profits, right?
Yep.
So if he got, I guess you could kind of say, well, where did he get Judy and what did he give up for him? Things like that. Maybe he traded for him recently. I don't know, but I'm okay taking my profit on some players. I did it a ton with James Robinson last year. Guys that ascend quickly, I'm totally cool with that. Plus he's got a young core, so you can give up a youth piece and still get better, and do that. So, I mean, I think we had similar strategies, just using different players. So I'm on the same page with you there.
Well, and we didn't get into my Judy talk earlier and the players were low or high on and things like that. I just feel like you kind of hit the nail on the head there. I think Judy is seeing a lot of value bump right now. And I'm not saying it's not warranted. I'm just saying maybe you can ride that lightning and kind of cash out now and maybe sell him for what you would consider to be over his value in a way, where the hype is kind of taken over. And this is where I love that we do these, because it's a way to sort of take a general thesis of how we approach trades and make it specific while still keeping it generic, right? And saying, hey, there are other managers out there that are just Jerry Judy's a top 10 receiver. It's sold. I'm done. I'm going to get Jerry Judy, and I don't care what the cost is. And they're looking at this. And if I had the team that Sizzle 56, I'm not saying it's a bad team. In a 10-team league, anybody can win it. But I just think the way that team is built with all the running back depth and the kind of the need at a second quarterback position in 10-team, you really only have one starting quarterback. Like that makes me nervous. And it is super flex. So, I mean, you might want to start a quarterback on that second flex option there. So I think this is one of those that I could see getting done, because DeAndre Swift is obviously got some heat on his name right now. And there's some, curiosity about where his value is going to be. But, all the off the field stuff aside, I think Swift is going to be somebody who you can lock and load in a flex at least all year this year and potentially the next 2 or 3. And you could do the same with Judy on this team. So you're really gaining some flexibility in your roster build, and you're losing Wentz to do it. I'm not really that worried about Wentz. I'm not sure how long he's going to be there. So for me, it just provides you a little extra kick to be able to, make it through this season and then still look at the next year. Since you don't have draft picks, you kind of have to get younger and stay younger if you can. So that was kind of where my thoughts were.
I really like this one, Andrew. Even though I mentioned I had traded for him earlier in that Dobbins deal, I'm kind of with you on Judy, because I think a lot of people, especially when I listen to podcasts and stuff like that, are talking about Judy like he's going to be a wide receiver 1. And I'm not sure I ever see. I think he's going to rest comfortably in that wide receiver 2 range, but I'm not sure he's ever kind of like an alpha. So I kind of agree with you there. He's a little overrated. And Swift is a guy I actually considered putting on my list of guys that because I think he might be one of my most acquired players this offseason. I just love Swift, and I get that he could have issues this year too because of the offense and all that, and people want to worry about Jamal Williams and whatever. But I just think that he's got nowhere to go but up. Even if he doesn't have and I like it for this team too, because he might not have a great year. He might have an RB 18 year this year or something like that. It's possible. I think he's going to do better, but I could certainly see that as someone looking at that as a likely outcome. But I think he's just going to give. I mean, his situation can go nowhere but up next year. He might have an improvement in quarterback. He almost has to have an improvement in terms of surrounding talent to take some pressure off of him. So I like this a lot. And like you said, with the team only having one quarterback, that Wentz and Judy, Sterling Shepard's whatever on the other side. So you're basically trading Judy and Wentz for Swift. And that's not a bad haul for Swift. So I think it's something that could potentially even get done. So I like that a lot. And like we said, it kind of does what he wanted to do, which is sort of still stay semi-competing this year, but it helps even more, I think, going forward.
Well, and just to clarify too, he does have Justin Fields as his second quarterback. So I want to make it sound like he doesn't. He has one startable right now. Fields will take over, so it's not like he's doing a bad job or anything like that. I just think that even with Fields and Brady as his other quarterback, you're probably going to want at least a third for some point of the year. You know what I mean? Like I can't see it being that you just rely on those two for the season. So I did want to clarify that. I was saying he has one startable quarterback. That's not 100% true because Fields will start, right? Like let's just be clear.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, at this point, you're starting Swift in your super flex. And in my mind, I'd rather have Wentz and Judy if I had that team. That's kind of where my thought went with that.
Okay, and with that, I'll go into mine, which has some similarities to yours, I think, in that the quarterback is sort of the centerpiece of it, because he does have 4 quarterbacks, which is overkill, especially in a 10-team league, I think. Yep. So I had him trading Trey Lance to, hopefully I'm not butchering this guy's name or handle or whatever, T Sonati 9 for 222 firsts. And I try to grab Mike Davis or Naheem Hines. Not that I care that much about him, but it does help you a little for this year. The main point is to get the first. And it may not be exactly what he was kind of thinking when he was asked for this five-man trade, but I basically look at those 222 firsts as a potential running back or maybe even 2 running backs in the future. Either that he drafts them next year or he uses that to trade up to draft one next year, or if he contends more than he thinks this year, he can always cash them in then. So, and like we said, he's great at QB. I don't think he needs Lance. I don't think we actually talked about him earlier, but I know he was on your list. I think Andrew is one of those overrated guys, and that's kind of how I feel too. He's valued way too highly right now, to where the point I think you can get this, and I would do it if you can't get the running back. I don't really care. I would do it for the 2 firsts. I just figured you try and throw that in there, and then okay, well, I'll take the running back out. Let's do it with just the picks and see if he'll do it. And the guy he's trading him to, he does have 2. He actually has 3 starters, but the 2 of them are Ryan Fitzpatrick and Daniel Jones. So he doesn't have necessarily a starter in 2022. He can justify that he's going to need one going forward. If he's a Lance guy, this might be better than it's better than Spencer Rattler or Sam Howell next year or whatever. And it will also help him this year because he does seem to have the kind of team where he has a mix of kind of old and young. So I think he probably is trying to contend this year while still not, being an overly old team. So I think it makes a lot of sense for him.
I 100% agree. And I think something that maybe gets washed over in a lot of these kinds of things, you don't have to hold those first. I think sometimes people look at this and we've talked about so many trades that involve picks. And I think Scott does it better than anyone, whereas like these are all just assets, right? Like that just gives me something. And picks will not go down in value. It's rare that they go down in value until the NFL draft. And then you might see a tier break where 109 goes down because there's really only 8 good players in Superflex. Or, that's a hard thing to predict this far out. So my logic, and I like this trade too, because I'm not high on Lance. Nick Whalen really did a good job of convincing me when we had that episode. But at the same time, if you can ride that lightning too, like the Judy hype, ride the Lance hype, and get Lance out from under, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to stress out about it. You kind of insulate your value. You don't have any first for next year, so you could keep him, but you could also trade him for somebody during the year, to a rebuilding team that's out and they're 0-6. Now you've got first to mess with that don't cost you a roster spot. They don't cost you anything. So I love that trade. I thought that was a really smart one.
And the guy trading him, I mean, yeah, he has the 2 firsts. It would leave him with no first, but I mean, he can also justify this is going to help me contend more next year, and it helps me in the future because Trey Lance is a rookie. So I just think that he's maybe not everything everybody has him cracked up to be after 17 college games and one 150-yard heave down the field that resulted in a touchdown in the preseason. So, Scott, any thoughts on that one before we get into yours?
Yeah, my thoughts are that I still love Trey Lance. So, okay, no.
Wait, never change, Scott. Never change.
Scott's the oddball out on this podcast.
Yeah, no, I think I'm gonna kind of tie mine into exactly what you guys are doing here, because I think we're kind of accomplishing the same things with some different trades. But essentially, if you want to compete this year, but you think you can make a stronger push next year, I don't see what's going to change next year. I mean, your guys are a year older. I get it. So like your young guys are kind of growing up, developing, but you don't have any picks to add to that. So by gaining draft picks now, you can either use them this year or next year. So if you're 4 games in and all of a sudden you're 4-0 and like one of the top contenders, how many teams did you see last year that had like Barkley and CMC, and you're like, wow, this season's pointless. And then by week 4, it was like, well, that guy's going to have the first pick next year. You know what I mean? So it's like, you just don't know what's going to happen. And I've had plenty of rosters where I felt the same way. I was like, yeah, I'm probably a year away, but let's wait a few games and see what happens here. So by acquiring picks now, you can use them later this season. You can use them next season. So one guy I will say for the future is Marquez Callaway. If you can flip him for a high pick, depending on how things go, if you're 1-3 and he has a really good first couple games, like sell as fast as you can. But my guy, I wanted to kind of tie in our earlier buys too. And I had 2 late guys, Michael Pittman and Brian Edwards. And so I used in this scenario, I used Deontay Johnson. Again, I think he might help you more this year than next year, just because I think the Steelers have had a really hard time trying to figure out quarterback of the future, and that's why they keep making Ben stick around. So I don't know what's going to happen there with Deontay. I do still like him a lot, but if you can sell him now for his value, team CMC or die hard, I think it's McCaffrey or die hard for Brian Edwards in a first, or the team that Rocky mentioned, trade Deontay to him for Michael Pittman in a first. He has 2 firsts. So if you can grab that draft capital, I'm more interested in that. But I also think that Edwards and or Pittman both have the upside of equaling or even surpassing what Deontay Johnson can provide you next year. If you're looking towards next season.
No Deontay slander on this pod, Scott.
No, I still have plenty of shares. I still love him, but in those opportunities where I can, it's kind of like the Judy thing, right? Like I'm willing to take my profits. So he was remember, Deontay was a mid-second round rookie pick. I mean, in a lot of cases. So
I didn't like Deontay coming out. So and now I love him. So
yeah. I didn't love him, but I did end up with quite a few because again, when you're talking mid-late second, I'm willing to take that gamble. And so if you look at where he's coming, he's the clear X in that offense. And we know Claypool's up and coming, and Juju might be gone next year, but they got a new offensive coordinator. I mean, there's just so many question marks. They brought in Najee, they're gonna use him. So I don't know. I think he's still gonna have a good year. But again, if you're 3-4 weeks into it and you want to look towards the future, he's a good one to move.
Yeah, and even as a Deontay stan myself, I don't hate these, especially like the Pittman and the first one, because I think there's a lot more risk with Brian. I mean, there's risk with Pittman too. We haven't seen it.
Yeah, Pittman's safer.
I think especially with the there's no alpha in that offense. Waller's the alpha in Las Vegas, but Pittman could certainly emerge as that alpha this year if there is going to be one.
I was going to say this too, and I don't do this all the time. I think some of my teams, I try to do it more than others. And in a 10 team, I kind of like stacking, and you've got Wentz on your bench, go get Pittman, right? I mean, like maybe that offense turns around. Like I don't mind that logic, and getting a first on top of that when you don't have a pick, I think is a terrific move. So I 100% love the Pittman move. I might even throw in like your fourth or like some little tiny piece after. And
Yeah.
be like, hey, let's balance this out, right? Like I don't mind throwing in a little receiver, running back, something like that on your bench to kind of get that deal done either. And I know that's something you always talk about too, Rocky, where it's like, be flexible with it. Obviously, we don't need to be hard and fast with this kind of trade. I think the value is on the Pittman and first side. But if the guy's real high on Deontay, he might be willing to do it straight up like that. So, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, and one more thing I want to mention, especially in regards to mine and Scott's trades. I like Scott said, I think he needs additional assets. So I really like the idea of getting picks.
Flexibility.
Yeah, exactly. And like we said, it doesn't even have to be that you make that pick. You maybe get another additional asset by trading the pick. And I think this is a great time to try and do a trade like that because September-ish is no one cares about picks in September. So everybody thinks they're going to win it this year. So and unless they're totally blowing it up already. So
I will piggyback on that. You're exactly right. But I hate this time of year when people say it's an early first. You don't know that. Like
I agree.
No,
too.
you
see bad
that
teams that are like not meant to do anything good. And then, oh my goodness, J.K. Dobbins and ETN go down and the whole league is different. Right, like, and we're gonna have. I hate to say it, we're gonna have more injuries after week 1, and week 2, and week 3. You're gonna start to see teams that don't deserve any right to be 3-0 going 3-0, and that early first is now a mid, and you went and traded all the world for it because you thought it was on one. Be careful, is all I'm saying with that. Like, go get the first. I'm fine with that, but don't start putting extra value on them. Right, like it's a turkey sandwich. Don't put mayo on it. Right, like let's just go get the turkey sandwich. We'll deal with that other part later. Because I think sometimes too that can cloud the judgment, and people say, "Oh, this team's terrible. I really want their first." It's not even owned by them. They traded it away. Like, dude, calm down. Everyone's 0-0. You know what I mean? Like, let's roll it back a sec. Because there are teams that are bad and there are teams that are good, but you can't start making that determination in September.
Yeah, totally agree. I basically assume every first is a mid. I basically think of it as 106 until December. I think by December you have an idea at that point.
I might even go November in some leagues, right? Or it's like, 0-9 heading into November. Yeah. Okay, I think we can kind of put the deal on the paper on this one.
Yeah, unless that first is on somebody else's team, that one's probably not getting traded.
Well, that's actually where it comes down to is if that first is owned by someone else, they're valuing it high, and then
Okay, so good trades all around. I really enjoyed these trades and this whole episode. It's great to do it with you two guys. It's the first time all three of us have been able to do it together. So
history.
A lot of fun this week. And so I'll just finish up by doing our business here. Just a reminder to follow the pod at Dynasty Junkies on Twitter. You can follow the three of us at our handles, which are, if you're watching, are on the screen. If you're not, we gave them all earlier. I don't want to bore you with it. Follow the DAP Network at DAP_network. And make sure you're subscribing to the DAP Network on YouTube as well. You can catch it when we go live. You can catch it when Fantasy Timeline goes live. Occasionally Trade Addicts goes live as well. So make sure you're following there. And please give us subscribe to the Dynasty Junkies. Give us a rating and review. We love seeing that. Let us know what you think. If there's anything you don't like, let us know that too, and we'll try and improve on it. But we really appreciate hearing from y'all out there. And a reminder too, if you want to send in a Find Me a Trade, you can DM it to any of us on Twitter. Or DM it to the Dynasty Junkies handle itself, and we'll get it on the show. We actually have a pretty good lineup of them right now, but we'll get it on as quick as we can. So I think that's pretty much everything. I think Scott did it last week. So Andrew, I'm going to throw it to you to end it for us.
Junkies out.